She looked like a fragile girl, confined to a wheelchair, soft-spoken, and completely dependent on her mother. To everyone around her, she was a child fighting endless illnesses, the kind of story that made people stop and feel sympathy, the kind of story people wanted to help. She was Gypsy Rose Blanchard, and for years, her life appeared to be a tragedy. She was said to suffer from multiple conditions: leukemia, muscular dystrophy, seizures. She needed feeding tubes, medication, constant care. Her mother, Dee Blanchard, was always by her side, protective, attentive, devoted. To outsiders, she looked like the perfect caregiver, a mother who had sacrificed everything for her sick child. They received support from charities, donations, free trips, even a house. People rallied around them, inspired by their story. But behind closed doors, something didn't feel right. There were small inconsistencies, details that didn't quite match, moments that seemed off. But no one questioned it deeply enough, because the story was convincing and the image was powerful. A sick child, a loving mother. No one wanted to believe anything else. But the truth was far more disturbing. For years, Gypsy had been living a life that wasn't real. The illnesses, many of them didn't exist. The wheelchair wasn't always necessary. The medications were not always needed. Her entire identity had been constructed, controlled by the one person everyone trusted: her mother. Gypsy wasn't just being cared for, she was being controlled. Her age was altered, her voice was monitored, her movements were restricted. Even when she began to grow older, she was still treated like a child. And over time, that control became something else, a prison. But from the outside, no one saw it, because everything looked perfect. Photos were shared, stories were told, and the illusion continued. Until Gypsy began to realize what was happening. And slowly, she began to question everything. But questioning wasn't enough, because leaving wasn't simple. Her world was controlled, her actions were watched, and any attempt to break free was stopped. So she turned to the only place she could find freedom: the internet. There, she created a different version of herself, one that wasn't confined, one that could speak, one that could connect. And eventually, she met someone, Nicholas Godejohn. At first, it seemed like a connection, someone who listened, someone who understood. But as their conversations continued, things became more intense, more serious, because Gypsy wasn't just looking for someone to talk to, she was looking for a way out. And over time, a plan began to form. Not all at once, slowly, piece by piece, until it became something real, something irreversible. On the night of June 14th, 2015, everything changed. Inside their home, the story everyone believed came to an end. Dee Blanchard was found dead, and Gypsy was gone. At first, it looked like a tragedy. A vulnerable girl, missing. The community reacted quickly. People feared the worst, because to them, Gypsy couldn't survive on her own. She needed help. She needed care, or so they thought. But as investigators began to search, the truth started to surface. Gypsy wasn't in danger. She had left, willingly, and she wasn't alone. When police found her, they discovered something shocking. She could walk. She spoke clearly. She wasn't the fragile child everyone thought she was. And suddenly, everything changed. The story people believed began to fall apart. Investigators dug deeper. Medical records were reviewed. Statements were questioned. And what they uncovered was something no one expected. For years, Gypsy had been a victim, not of illness, but of manipulation. Her mother had created a false reality, a life built on deception, one that kept Gypsy dependent and under control. It was a case that shocked the world because it forced people to confront something unsettling. The idea that someone could appear so caring while causing so much harm. And yet, the story didn't end there, because now another question remained. Why did it end this way? Why didn't she just leave? Why did it go this far? And the answer was complicated. Years of control, years of isolation, years of being told who she was and what she couldn't do. It changes a person. It shapes how they think, how they act, and sometimes it leads to decisions that don't seem to make sense from the outside. Gypsy and Nicholas were both arrested, and as the case unfolded, the world watched closely, trying to understand, trying to process, because this wasn't just a crime, it was a story about control, about identity, about what happens when someone is denied their freedom for too long. Gypsy eventually pleaded guilty. She was sentenced to prison. Nicholas received a much harsher sentence, and the case continued to raise questions about responsibility, about blame, about where victim ends and accountability begins. Even now, people are divided. Some see Gypsy as a victim. Others see her as responsible for what happened. But one thing remains clear. Her life was never what it seemed. The girl in the wheelchair, the sick child, the helpless daughter, none of it was real. It was a story, a carefully constructed illusion. And when that illusion finally broke, everything came crashing down. Because the most disturbing part of this case isn't just what happened in the end, it's how long it took for anyone to realize that the truth had been hiding in plain sight. And maybe that's what makes it so unsettling, because sometimes the most dangerous situations don't look dangerous at all. They look ordinary, convincing, even inspiring, until one day they're not. And by then, it's already too late. And that's where this story leaves us. This is Global Shadows. Subscribe and stay with the story.